You guys will all have to bear with me. I am terrible at public speaking and I have chemo brain, so I wrote my speech. Sorry. First and foremost, it's an honor to be here tonight at Emory. Let me just give a brief overview of my credentials since a lot of you may not know who I am. I was diagnosed at age 22 with stage 2B breast cancer that was also triple positive just 6 months after my undergraduate degree was completed. What that means is that the tumor fed on my body's production of progesterone and estrogen, the two female hormones, and was also HER2 receptive. The HER2 part of my diagnosis is probably the scariest part. Essentially, HER2 positive in a cancer diagnosis means that the cancer tends to be more aggressive, like mine, and it is so dangerous because the genetic mutation makes breast cells divide uncontrollably. It's what caused my tumor to be nothing in May 2011, a little bit of cystic material in July 2011, and a 3-centimeter tumor with lymph node invasion by Christmas. 7 months. Tumors with a HER2 positive reaction used to be a death sentence before 1998. When Herceptin was introduced, women were told to get their affairs in order. When I met my oncologist in February 2012, 1 month after my bilateral mastectomy, I asked him to scare me because when we met, I was still in the shock of my diagnosis and trying to see what all was necessary and what could be potentially avoided. He told me that with the HER2 part of my diagnosis, he could get me to Christmas 2012. If I had waited for my annual in May, I would not be standing here today. I am alive today, and that is amazing. I tell you this for 2 reasons. The first is I hope I am scaring all of you into doing monthly body checks. So who's going to go home and do some feeling up? Anybody? Hands? Yeah? Okay, great. And majority of breast cancer in females is found by a partner. So gentlemen, ladies, you know your job now. But I also tell you this for the purpose of hope. My attitude did not save my life. My loved ones could not cure the cancer with their support of me. These things helped, but what made it possible for me to attend tonight was the 14 months of chemo I went through, the surgeries I had, and the 25 rounds of radiation that unfortunately did not give me any superpowers. When I signed the consent form, I actually had to acknowledge that it was not going to make me glow in the dark. Truly unfortunate. It was a lost opportunity. My treatment plan was possible because of funding to research new drugs and ways of removing cancer. Events like Relay for Life allow the American Cancer Society to provide the money necessary for this research. I like that Relay for Life has never emphasized one cancer over another. Breast cancer, my cancer, gets so much publicity, which the mass comm major in me wants to say is attributed to a very successful PR campaign. But who all knew that last month was Colorectal Cancer Awareness Month? Anybody? Yes? All right, we got a couple of hands. My theory is that they couldn't come up with a sexy companion phrase to feel your boobies. Just think of how ridiculous it would be to say on the radio, this is Colorectal Cancer Awareness Month. Feel your butt, know your butt. Relay for Life has also put emphasis on the caregivers. When I was in the midst of my chemo treatment, I would wake up, brush my teeth, and be so exhausted by that I would go back to sleep for another 5 hours. I can't imagine what I would have done without my mother bringing me snack plates, or my friends who came over to watch movies with me and secretly tucked me in when I passed out 10 minutes after they got there. One of my biggest caregivers was Thomas. Thomas, raise your hand. Thank you.
Hello.
When I was diagnosed, I told him I needed to know then if he couldn't handle what my diagnosis might mean, because I wasn't going to try to save my life and my relationship at the same time. Without hesitation, he asked, okay, now what are we going to do? And even if he couldn't be at every chemo treatment, he has been instrumental in rebuilding my self-image. He doesn't think what he did was anything special, and will tell you he did everything he did because he loves me. But anyone who has been through a cancer diagnosis knows how hard it can be on a partner. So to all the caregivers here tonight, you deserve a high five for everything you have done and continue to do to make the everyday tasks easier. The first theme of Relay for Life is to celebrate. Celebrate every new day, every clean scan, every milestone reached. I have lived 2 years, 3 months, and 7 days since my diagnosis. I celebrated every hair when it came back on my head, every card I got while undergoing treatment, and going to my first Relay for Life event as a cancer survivor. Cancer taught me to celebrate simple things like nose hairs. Because just for the record, if you have to go through chemo, you're going to lose your nose hairs. Good luck with allergy season. The 2 birthdays I have celebrated since my diagnosis have been so much sweeter because I fought to get to both. Relay for Life gives cancer survivors the ability to congregate with each other outside of the treatment centers and truly appreciate their accomplishments. I didn't come here to be deliberately inspirational because at the end of the day, I am one of thousands and my story is not unique. Every day, young people my age get cancer, and breast cancer continues to affect women and men. If you want inspiration material, I will tell you about my friend, Mr. Painter, a friend I made in the chemo clinic when I went in for my first chemo, and he was wearing a winter jacket, deer hunter's cap, and a lime green scarf. Looking around the room, I decided that any man brave enough to wear that ensemble was who I wanted to sit beside. He had been diagnosed in November of 2011 with terminal colon cancer that his doctor had misdiagnosed as IBS for years until it was too late to make a difference. And of course he was angry. He wanted to live to see his newborn grandson graduate high school. But he fought for months, then days of life with everything he had and outlived the longest time frame he had been given by his doctors. He knew with every dose of caustic chemo that he was buying himself minutes, but he bought them anyways. He knew he wasn't meant to die an old man in his bed at 100. But he represents the remember theme of Relay for Life. We all know someone who would still be with us if a cure for their cancer had been found in time. And it is important to remember they are survivors too. Dying from cancer does not mean you lost or you gave up. I hate reading they lost their battle with cancer because being a survivor is not a term affixed to those who live because sometimes survivors die. That first breath you take after a diagnosis, when the sharp drop of going from living immortally to being terrified of death is what makes you a survivor. That first breath means you're going to give it your best shot. And if cancer is going to be your cause of death, it's going to have a hell of a time taking you down screaming. To me, the most inspirational people I met while doing treatment were the ones who knew the cancer would kill them. They put themselves through the hell of chemo, radiation, and any experimental drug they could just to buy themselves a year, a month, and then a day. Anyone who has watched someone go through a terminal disease knows what I'm talking about. And when the disease overpowers them in the end, they don't lose, they don't give up. They go out the same way they started their journey, as a fighter. I suppose that's the reason I never understand why I'm invited to speak at events like this. When I was diagnosed, I put my life into the hands of my surgeons and oncologists. Their expertise made me never doubt that if I just did the treatment plan they recommended, I would live. Sure, there were some nights when I would be afraid to sleep because I thought my breathing had become a voluntary function, and if I fell asleep, I wouldn't remember to breathe. But I trusted my doctors, and I'm here today because it was not my time to go. The treatment worked for me. It doesn't work for everyone. Cancer is an overwhelming diagnosis. We know so little about what causes it and what can keep it from coming back. What we do know isn't sufficient to save all of our loved ones. The odds are not in our favor to make it to old age without ourselves or an immediate family member being diagnosed with cancer. Cancer does not care how old you are or how busy you are or that you can't afford to die. Cancer doesn't care. Funding research is our only chance to ever truly understand a disease that takes so many and scars the ones who dare to defy it with treatment plans that almost kill the patient before the disease. I have spoken to people who feel like that phrases like the war on cancer and fight back are too strong for today when wars are on the news every day. But if going up against cancer is not a war, then I don't know what is. As a caregiver, you have to be constantly doing triage and assessing your enemy's progress. As a survivor, you have to face every morning knowing that you may die and change your strategy with every progress report you get. And your medical team has to know when to differentiate between quantity and quality of life and prepare their patient for the future. I am not in remission. The doctors don't use that word anymore. They tell you that you have no evidence of disease. which means at the time of your last scan, there was no cancer present. The life of a cancer survivor is not an enviable one. Endless doctor's appointments, scans, and scares. My oncologist had a joke about the post-treatment life. He said to me that one night I would get drunk, and when I got home, I would hit my foot on something like a table. Everybody's been there. Let's not fool ourselves. When I wake up in the morning and my toes were swelled and bruised, I would call him in a panic and say, "Dr. Hauk, the cancer is back and it's in my toe." The American Cancer Society has peer-to-peer programs and events like Relay for Life to help people who have been affected by cancer get through the day-to-day events after the treatment is over. I try not to ask why I was given cancer, but on the days that I do, I also have to ask why I made it, and some of my friends from chemo couldn't. People like Mick, a guy I went to high school with who I didn't recognize at first because by the time I saw him in the chemo clinic, he was tired. A weariness that can only be experienced when your every breath is a fight for your life. I wish he could have died of old age, years from now, because a cure had been found in time for his cancer, but it wasn't, and he didn't, because if life was fair, we wouldn't need times like these to cry and then push for a cure, not just for breast cancer like mine, but for all cancer. Many of you will participate tonight, giving your time and money to eradicating cancer. Then tomorrow, or a few months from now, be so busy with living that you won't mean to, but tonight's message of awareness will be a distant memory. The goal I had for my speech tonight was to inspire a lasting desire to maintain routine doctor appointments, because however boring they are, they're setting baselines for potentially cancerous symptoms, and to give freely of ourselves whenever the occasion called for involvement to making cancer a disease of the past and granting more birthdays. Cancer is not a new disease. The earliest found cancer was in the jawbone of a man who had been dead for thousands of years, and it was written about on Egyptian papyrus. It would be unrealistic to think that we will see cancer wiped off the top killer list in this country during our lifetimes. But the money we raise tonight and the awareness that causes us to keep track of our bodies is a good first step. Thank you.